right? So again, you open up Jupyter Notebooks, you navigate to the folder you want to. If you've saved all of the notebooks that I sent you in a single directory, you can just open them up. So if I open up strings, this will pop up. And you can use these notebooks as templates for how you write your notebooks. Okay, so if you want to see what's generating all of this business here, just double click it and you'll see what's hiding behind it. Okay, so for example, if you want to write Python code, you have three backdashes, and then inside of there, you have code. You have headings, you have italics, you have bold examples, all the basics that you'll need to know how to make your notebooks look pretty, which is the goal, pretty and descriptive, will be in the notebooks that I send you. So hopefully that helps you. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started with a crash course on Python. So please take a moment to open up this notebook if you have it available. And then if you want, and I can't hear you, just send me a message in the chat and I'll stop. Okay, so I'm assuming that most of you come from a R programming background, maybe a MATLAB programming background, maybe a little bit of Python, maybe C++ even, or no programming background. In all of the cases, Python is a great language to learn. It's very easy to learn. It's very natural to learn. So I started with C++ and found Python after learning C++. It was amazing how intuitive it was to just guess what to do, and I try to type it and it works. So as we're going along here and you're following my lecture, feel free to, underneath the cell that I code in, make an additional cell by clicking the little plus button. And then if you have an idea that you want to try, just try it underneath the code that I give you. Okay. So let's get started. Now, I'm not going to cover the basic types in Python the way that maybe a textbook would. You're just going to experience them as I'm lecturing. And the first type that I'm going to mention is the string type. Okay. So I'm not talking about floats or ints or things like that. I'm just going to do with the core types and the other numerical types and those details you'll see as we're going along. So Python strings are sequences of characters. These characters these are ASCII type characters. So letters, numbers, symbols, these types of things. So any sequence of characters surrounded by double quotes or by single quotes is a string. So for example, if I assign to the variable first name, I can assign that to be John. Last name variable, I can assign that to be Doe. And notice here, I type John inside of double quotes, and here I type Doe inside of single quotes. It means the same thing, okay? Now, as a data scientist and someone that will be interacting with Python a lot and presenting your code, I encourage you to do this in a consistent way. Pick a way that you want and don't switch between them unless is needed, as you'll see when that's needed later on. So pick whichever one you want and stay consistent. Also, we're doing variable assignment here. Variables are names which must begin with non-numerical values, okay? And they should always be lowercase. So variables will be typically lowercase, whereas something like objects or class objects will be uppercase. And we'll get to those next lecture. Okay, now it's also standard to separate words in a variable name by the underscore. You can't put any white space. White space will be interpreted by Python in a different way. In fact, it's interpreted several different ways. So let's go ahead and do this. So if we do first name equals John, okay, and then actually to speed things up, I can just, because of the way I made these for you, you can just copy that and then paste it in the cell, and then to run the cell, press Shift Enter. Okay. Now, notice the little 1 right here in brackets. This is indicating that this cell was the first cell run out of all of the cells. Okay, so it's important to know that these have been defined before, for example, I do anything in this cell, and that's why these numbers are here. Okay, so we can check the values of these variables by simply calling the print function. We press Shift Enter, John Doe. So we've encountered several different things in just these 2 cells. Here we have a comment. So a 1-line comment, you can start with the pound symbol and then type your comment. We have a variable assignment. We have a string with double quotes. We have a variable assignment with a string with single quotes. And then we also encountered the first built-in Python function print. Now I will have a link on Canvas to all of the built-in functions. There's quite a few of them, but don't worry about them yet. We'll be exposed to them as we go. Okay. Now notice in the output of these print statements, I see John Doe, and there's no space in between them. As with many programming languages, we can include a new line character, which is the \n following first name. So if we just paste that in, let's look at the output now by pressing Shift Enter. We see now that there is a new line placed in between these 2 values. Next up, we have string concatenation. So string concatenation is the process of joining one string to the end of another. So for example, if we wanted to join John and Doe, so the first name and last name together, the string concatenation operator is the plus symbol. Okay. So in Jupyter Notebooks, if we want to quickly view what happens when we perform an operation like this, we don't have to necessarily call the print function. We can simply just type what we want on the last line of the cell. In this case, it's only 1 line, and it will output what you have. So you don't always have to call the print function. Now, this is only true in the Python REPL and Jupyter Notebooks, not in scripting. Now, I don't like that there's not a space in between here, so I'm going to go ahead and add a space in there. So first name plus like that. So notice there is a space there, and then plus last name. Okay, John Doe. Now, if you're bored already, and this isn't, trust me, I'm going to start picking up really fast here in a few minutes. All right, so what's up next? Oh, string interpolation. So string interpolation is basically, you can think of this as you have a variable and you want to convert it to a string, right? Or you want to place it inside of a string. The way that we're doing this with Python versions 3.6 and higher, which all of you should have if you just recently installed Anaconda, is with what's called an F string. So notice that there's an F right before I enter into my string. This is indicating that, okay, inside of this string, anything that's inside curly braces will now be converted to of type string. So for example, first name, last name will be converted to fit in here. And then this integer value will also be converted in here. So if I just copy all of this code here, place it right here, press Shift Enter, I'll see that it was passed in and converted to its value. So the variables will be expressed in the string as their value. If I did not have that F there, notice that it doesn't do that. So in order to do this properly, well, not properly, in order for this to work, you have to type the F right before, which tells the Python interpreter that this is a format string, and you're formatting these variables as type string. Now, on to the most important thing that I can ever tell you about Python. It is by far the most important thing. Everything in Python is an object, and objects have attributes and methods. Okay, I'm going to say it one more time. Everything in Python is an object, and objects have attributes and methods associated with them. Okay, so Python is a object-oriented programming language, and we'll learn a lot about that next time. But basically what it means for now is exactly what I just said. As soon as you encounter a new type of object in Python, in order to really understand what it is, you should probably look up it's attributes and or methods. For example, I have a link here that you can click on, which, by the way, if you double click this markdown cell, you'll see how to add in hyperlinks. So if I click on this link here, I see a list of string methods, okay? And you can access these methods on a given instance of a string with the dot operation. So if you have attributes, dot your attribute. If it's a method, dot the name of your method, and then close in the parentheses. And that is because methods are functions. They're functions that are a part of the object that you're looking at. So for example, here, I instantiate the variable test string to be the actual string hello world. And then I'm going to call the title method on test string. So if I just take this code here and I paste it, press Shift Enter, there we go. Notice that H and W are now uppercase. So this method capitalizes the first letter of each of the words in the string, as it says here. And you would have seen that if you went to that documentation page there. Now it's important to remember that this is, see this out right here? This is what this function returns. Okay, so sometimes functions don't return things, sometimes they do. If you see an out there, that means that this method, i.e. a function specific to the string, it returned this value. It did not modify the value of test string. And this is a very important point to note, that some things, for example, strings, are immutable. They can't be modified once instantiated. So this is a return value. It hasn't changed anything about test string. So if I just print out test string real fast, I'll see that it's still lowercase h, still lowercase w. So strings are immutable. And this right here, the output right here, says that this method has returned something. Okay, so next let's try this method, count. I see that I've listed it up here. So let's try the test string dot count. So if I copy that, paste it, and run it. Oh, I see that something bad happened. So this is a Python error message. Okay, so in this message, it's quick, or the best way to deal with this is to quickly scroll down to the last line. Type error. Count takes at least one argument, 0 were given. So what that tells me is that something needs to be passed into this function. I can get more help by calling the Python help method, help function, which is built into base Python. So help, so test string dot count, let's see what it does. It gives me information about that method. So we have this thing sub right here. So what is sub? Sub is a string. So it's going to return the number of non-overlapping occurrences of this sub thing. So I need to pass it a string. So let's go ahead and copy this code here and paste it. Run it. Okay, so my original string here is printed. And then test string dot count, I passed in the L, and I see that L appears 3 times in hello world in that variable. So that's how it works. And that's how you should troubleshoot these things. Look at your error message, try to decipher it, and then use the help built-in function in Python to figure out what's going on or what you need to add. Okay, and there are so many string methods that I'm not going to be able to cover. And I encourage you to click on that link and go through each of these and kind of play with them. Not all of them, but just get a sense of how to handle strings. For example, I often encounter this one, the replace method. So what this is going to do is it's going to search through this string here, which I assigned to the variable txt, and it's going to replace bananas with apples. Okay. Now, this is useful in terms of data science in the sense that a lot of times you're reading in textual data or categorical data, and it's of a certain format, and you want to replace the nasty looking format with a format that is more suited for programming tasks. So this one I like. Okay, next up. So earlier I mentioned that strings are sequences of characters, ASCII characters, okay? So a sequence has length, right? So we can find the number of characters in a string by calling the built-in Python function len, okay? So anytime your object is a sequence of things, strings are one of these types. Anytime you have a sequence of things, you can find the number of things or elements in it by calling the len function. Okay, so what's happening here? I assign the variable full name to be first name plus space last name. Okay, and then I call an f string and I print the value of full name contains the value of length applied to full name right there, characters. So John Doe, that variable or that value contains 8 characters. And we count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, white space, 6, 7, 8. All right, so we verified that it works. So also this points out that white spaces are indeed characters. Okay, so since strings are sequences of characters, sequences are ordered, right? So anytime you have an ordering on an object, you can access each element in that object by location or by index. In Python, like many other programming languages, indexing starts with the value 0. Okay, so I'm going to just call this, copy, paste, and I sort of want to put in a print statement here. So print f string, so test string equals, and then throw that into the curly braces, test string like that, close off my string. Okay, so now I'll print this value out and I can compare it to this indexing here. Oh, maybe I need a new line. Let me add in a new line there by doing \n inside of my string. Okay, so here's my original string. If I access the 0 index by looking at the variable and then brackets 0, so index 0 is A. Brackets 1, so that's index 1, B. Index 2, C. So forth and so on. Okay, now we can also reverse index. And by that, I mean, sometimes we want to look at the tail end of a string or a list or any other type of thing that is an ordered sequence. And that's where reverse indexing comes into play. And I use it all the time. I can't even give an example because I use it in most data sciencey types of things I do, because I'm always looking at arrays of things and I want to know what the end is. So let me go again and do this string equals curly braces string, convert that, close that off, add in a new line character. Okay, so here's my test string. And now if I pass in the index value -1, notice that it's this value. So the very last item in your sequence of characters, you can access with the -1 index. For F, -2, so forth and so on, which is very useful. And you'll see it throughout the semester. Next up, we have slicing. And this is the last concept on strings. So anytime you can index through an object, you can slice through it. And here is an example of slicing. Let's just go ahead and run this code and see what happens. Okay. And maybe I'll print out test string just so we can compare it. All right. So test string index 1 is B, index 2 is C, index 3 is D. So if I now pass into my bracket 1:4, this is slicing. So this is gathering each item starting at the first index and ending at the last index -1. So the first number you place in is inclusive, each integer value up to 4 non-inclusive. So if the slicing 1:4 produce BCD, so 0, 1, so 1, so 1, 2, 3, right? So it's non-inclusive on the back end. So it's very, it can be confusing, especially if you're coming from MATLAB, where I'm pretty sure something like that would be inclusive. At least in Julia, it will be inclusive. But in Python, the tailing, the last bit that you pass in is non-inclusive. Okay. All right. So there are many other methods, and I encourage you to look at these methods, look at tutorials on strings, a bunch of which I posted, because formatting strings is a part of formatting data, and understanding how to manipulate the sequence of characters to look and do the things you want is a part of being a data scientist. It's just manipulating data. That's it. Okay, so next up, we have part 2. So this is, if I think I sent it to you as part 2, lists, tuples, and sets. Okay. All right, so.
Professor, I had a question.
Yes.
So when using a string interpolation, whether you're using a variable or a method, you always have to surround it with curly brackets?
Yes, so basically, the idea behind it is that if you put an F, and then you can just have that or something, just you make a string like that, right? Whatever you pass in here will be converted to string format. So if you have like a variable like that, and you pass it in there, it will convert that variable to its value. If this happened to be another string, or string, whatever, it will convert that. If it happened, you can call functions in here, right? So if I wanted to like do the dot upper method on X, like that, you can do whatever you want inside of here, and the output will be converted to the type appropriate for the string. So the value that you get by applying a method or a function, or even like if I, for example, if I had like X equals to 1, Y is equal to 2, and then inside of here, I just did X plus Y like that, it'll do the operation inside there. It's a safe space, I think, to just do regular coding inside of there. Though you don't want to make it too messy and put